Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another fabulous episode of the Healthcare Trailblazers podcast. Excited to be sitting here today with a fabulous doctor, successful healthcare practitioner, and overall fantastic human, and also present client of Previva Health Group. So we get the chance to work together. Dr. Tepedino, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's wonderful. I actually have been looking forward to having just time to talk, to speak with you. I think of you as not just a pioneer in what you do, but also truly a friend. And I get excited when there are other people who are in the healthcare field and they feel called or compelled to do something. You can sense that in individuals. So I think that I've sensed that from the very beginning with you. And on a side note, you're not paying me to say this, but your company has been top notch. So if really working with Previva, like I've been approached by many others through the last year and a half, 2 years, and you guys are just the best of the best. So I know you're not paying me to say that, but I just thought I'll plug it in there because you're too humble to want to plug yourself.
I know it means the world, and it's I really do appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure, working with you in your office, and like you said, it's nice to see people in general in healthcare that care and feel that calling, et cetera. But on our side, when we deal with dozens and dozens of doctors, just kind of return the compliment a little bit. But I really do mean it. Like the doctors that I can sense right away when we're bringing someone on board if this is going to be a successful program or not. And it really has a lot to do with how involved is the doctor. And, and when you have a doctor that just doesn't communicate well, doesn't, just like, hey, is this just not involved, it doesn't work. And doctors like yourself that you're seeing, and we'll get into it, but you're seeing, your practice is responsible for caring for 8,000 individuals. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of people. And I know that you are, you both know how to delegate as well as be involved in the parts that are necessary for the patient's care. So it's fantastic. And it's the doctors like you that continue to make the healthcare wheels spin, hopefully in a positive direction. Right before we jumped on, we were talking about kind of like your background, your family background, very interesting history. So usually we start with the actual individual, but I think we could take a couple steps back. Where did your family come from? You've got really interesting name. Your first name is, your last name is Italian, and your first name is what? Where does it come from?
So my first name is Miguel, which is Spanish first name. My last name is Tepedino, which is Italian. And I think what you're alluding to is how did I end up in Lake City, Florida, which is north central Florida, which is known for kind of a more rural, really beautiful country, really farm life sort of backbone. It's simple. We keep running from dictators. All kidding aside, my grandfather on the Italian side, my dad's dad, didn't like Mussolini very much, saw the writing on the wall, and went to Cuba. You know how that ends up. And then my mother's side, they were from Spain, her father, and specifically from the Basque province, which is the north coast of Spain. And he didn't like Franco very much. So he ended up in Cuba, married Cuban women, had my parents. My parents met in Miami, of course, after Castro. So I remember my dad telling me he left with 3 pair of underwear on, and it was just him and his sister. They didn't let his mother out, and he had to lie about his age to be able to work at a Firestone, to change tires, to be able to do night school, to be able to. So when I think about how blessed I am to have had 2 parents that again gave about me, to invest in me, their time and love and effort, I kind of feel like it would have been a travesty if I didn't do the best at whatever I was applying myself to. And they never told me you have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a doctor. As a matter of fact, I actually really appreciate that. And I've got 2 daughters. I'm nervous because I never want to, I want people to find their path, but I also want them to feel inspired on that path. But so for me, growing up in Lake City, my path to medicine was my grandfather. He was an OBGYN. And he was one of the first OBGYNs in this community. And he delivered over 4,420 something babies. Now that's in Lake City. In Cuba, prior to Castro showing up, he had delivered almost 6,000 babies. So this is a guy who brought like 10,000 lives into the world. And so the way I wanted to be a doctor, and I know people say, well, my dad was a doctor, my mom was a doctor, it wasn't quite like that. For me, the way it went down is he got stuck with me on call on a weekend. And in the operating room, I don't know if you've ever been in one, but there's a room before the operating room, which is kind of like the clean room where it's like, hey, you can't get anything dirty past. So he set me up in the clean room where they kind of scrub up and they do all the things they're doing. And I had a crayon set and, some coloring things. And there's a big window so that, the surgeons, he or she can see into the, operating room. So I'm coloring and I'm kind of like standing up every so often, taking a look, and next thing you know, a screaming real life baby is in the, like, literally brought to the view. And I was like, wait, I'm at the door. I don't know how that baby got in there. There wasn't a baby in there. And I was just like, so when we left, when he finally was done, I said, I know what I want to be. And he says, oh, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a magician. And so, like, whatever that magic trick is that you just did, I want to do. So that is how I think I was, gosh, I don't know if I was 9. It was like maybe around 8 or 9 years of age. And that was, so I firmly thought I was going to be a magician like my grandpa. And then he told me, he was like, well, it's not quite magic. He's a little, there. And so then, if I'm being totally honest, I know it's being recorded, which means this will follow me forever. My mom would warn me. She'd say, careful what you say because it'll follow you. So by 12 or 13, I started to realize what money was, right? Because to buy stuff, like video games at the store, back then, I think it was like Nintendo games, like old school Mario Brothers. You needed money. And so you go to the store, you need like 30, 40 bucks. And I thought, well, I need a job that's going to get me money. So if I'm going to be now this magician / doctor, I need to be one that, so I think it's in the Time or Newsweek or something, they give you a projection of like different doctors and salaries they make. And at the very top was neurosurgeon. So at that point, I was just only thinking money. So then I turned to my grandpa and said, I told you I was going to be a magician like you, but now I think I want to be a neurosurgeon because they make $1.4 million a year. And I remember thinking as a little kid, only thinking about money at that point and not understanding like humanism and kindness and like the reward and self-satisfaction. And so then as time went on, I realized, oh, wait a second, that's a really stupid thing to just want to do something for money. And then I went on to medical school. So I did my undergrad at UF. I was very fortunate to be what we call a triple gator, which is where I did undergrad, med school, and residency all at University of Florida. That was by choice. And I'm biased. So, go University of Florida, go Gators, go College of Medicine. I'm still blessed to teach residents and medical students in different capacities there. And you're not going to find a better education in the state of Florida as far as medical school. Yeah, I said it. Okay, so with that being said, as I went through medical school, I realized I liked everything, Mendel.
Okay.
I liked everything. On my surgery rotation, I loved the hands-on aspect of it. On my psychiatry rotation, I loved how in somebody's moment of vulnerability, that little acts of kindness and even listening and understanding and appreciating, that the mind, and when it goes awry or when we're in a position that it's taken over in unhealthy ways, that our lives can be totally changed. And, there's so many different people along the path that help get me to where I am today that, I would be nothing without them. And I want to always give credit for the teachers before me. And then on my OBGYN rotation, I actually loved it. I remember telling my grandpa I loved it. He was still alive at the time. I said, but I feel like I'm not sure. And he said, you need to do what makes you happy. Don't do what I did. Do what makes you happy. And then I did an internal medicine rotation. It was great. Felt a little bit more like kind of it was very academic in how we approached it, in which I appreciate evidence-based medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I did peds and I liked peds, but sometimes I just kind of wanted to, like the parents, I was like, oh, if I could get you to stop smoking, your kid's asthma would be so much better controlled. So I realized whatever I was going to do there, I still needed to have some influence over the parents. And then I did family medicine. And it was like the shoe that just fit right, or the glove that was like a perfect fit. And it was that balance of humanism, of a little bit of psychiatry, a little bit of procedure, a little bit of, women's health, and a little bit of, and I was in love. And I remember thinking to myself, I went and talked to one of my advisors, and they said, you're either incredibly noble or incredibly stupid. And they said, don't you know, like primary care is like, at a tertiary care center in general, primary care is not like a cool thing to do. In a tertiary care center, it's like primary care, often it's like you're the consult for the orthopod who's the uber goober subspecialist, or this one microvascular type of neurosurgeon needs this clearance, and you just go over there as a hospitalist and clear it. Well, so a tertiary care center is very different than where I practice medicine in a in a city, like not a big crazy huge thriving metropolis, but a beautiful city called Lake City. Lake City, we have the opportunity to be really kind of what in your mind is the quintessential physician,
Okay.
which is everything from your pastor, priest, rabbi component to your lawyer, to like where there's this intimacy of people will really bless you by being able to be in a position to be there for them and tell you things that maybe they wouldn't have told other people. And those kind moments, like I remember 2 weeks ago, I won't say any names because I want to break HIPAA. A gentleman who'd been my patient for many, many years had been just discharged and put into hospice. And I turned to my wife after the girls were asleep and I said, "Hey, you mind if I go up and go check on somebody up?" And she said, "You go." And I got to sit there and we spent 2 or 3 hours just talking. I mean,
You
literally
went to
cracking
him?
up. I went to him.
Wow.
I went to him. And we
Wow.
sat up. We sat up and his wife was gone and and we sat up for 2 or 3 hours and we just like shot the, you know what, I won't say it because I don't know if I'm allowed to say bad words on this thing. And then 48 hours later, he was called home. He was gone. But, I didn't do that because I want to sit here on a podcast and tell you, I did that because I'm blessed that he would allow me that opportunity to be able to be not just his doctor, but really somebody where, as we're in those moments, like oh man, I get chills literally thinking about it. So anyways, that's what I do.
No, but let's dig into that a little bit because what you're describing is I feel like becoming it. It's what the definition of the family doctor was probably not so long ago, probably 20 years ago. I remember when, like, even when myself and my siblings were being born, you still had that kind of thing where, like, that there was that doctor that delivered all of your siblings and they were your family doctor. They basically birthed you and then buried you at a certain point. Like it was like the doctor that, and the way that healthcare has been transformed over the last even 20 years has been, there's been radical changes. I'd say, definitely some for the better, definitely some for the worse. But I think that part of the downside of it is this kind of shift in that relationship between the doctor and the patient. The thing that you're describing is so precious, and it's so important, I think, for real medical care, because the scenario that you have now often where you kind of just have these larger systems and they just have employees who are doctors. And I said the story recently actually on the Dr. Mike podcast I was telling you about. It was the funniest thing to me when my wife was giving birth to our most recent child. And this doctor comes in, this young woman, and she gives her the whole spiel on the various vaccines. And not to get into the details of that, but I was just looking at her and just found it so amusing that she would even assume that we would take anything she has to say seriously at all. This is the first time we'd ever seen this woman, because every single time we come in, it's a different person. You're clearly, whether the talking points you were given is true or not, you have no context on us. There's no relationship.
The context matters. And, you're right. There are so many good things and bad things about how medicine has grown and progressed. Let me start with some of the good. I would say about 80% that walks through my door, the incredible people I work with, the amazing APRNs and PAs and myself, being an MD, I think about 80% that walks through the door, we're hopefully not just comfortable, but proficient at being able to manage. One of the key things for us to do is identify that 20% that is outside or beyond the scope, because we have in medicine come so far that the breadth of which your traditional family medicine, primary care, internist, whatever you want to call them, used to be, the knowledge was here. But in the last 50 years, the amount of medical knowledge that has really, and this is where, you could probably talk about AI and some of these other things that are coming into play. It's grown so much that, it's impossible for one person to master all those things. So it's really key to identify, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. and I know what's beyond. And so when you have some of these specialists, it's cool to have them, right? It's great to have them. And some of the specialists have specialists of that. Like, for example, if I refer you to ortho, orthopod's going to say, oh, whoa, 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 I'm the hip or shoulder guy. I'm not the elbow wrist guy. Whoa, 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 I'm the wrist guy. I'm not the finger guy. And so, so it's almost as if within those things that they themselves, those men and women choose like what they do or don't want to be doing. And so, I'm always careful to say, that's kind of the upside of medicine progressing. The downside is the lack of connection, the lack of continuity of care, the lack of context, which I think is the word that you said, which I think is really crucial here, because I will have somebody who will come see me after they've seen one of my good friends who's a neurosurgeon at UF, Adam Polifka, amazing neurosurgeon. And they'll say, well, Dr. Polifka, I've only met him once or twice. He wants to do this surgery. And I'm like, and the guy is like a ninja. Like, he's incredible at what he does. Of course, he's going to do the person right. But the patient is not going to do it until I, who have been their primary care provider for the last 15 years, give them the A-OK. And I'm thinking, I'm just a small little chump change compared to this other person. But I get what you're saying, which is there's the context of they know that I'm going to be with them if God wills it, from the beginning of them being in the practice until really up to potentially until they die. And so there's that sense of accountability.
Yeah.
I think that's really the key there is I'm in a small town called Lake City, Florida, right? I was born and raised here. I'm first generation, but that doesn't make me any less of a Lake Cityan. And so my commitment to this area has nothing to do with financial, like, oh, I got to get paid or not. It has to do with like, these are black, white, red, purple, Christian, non-Christian, Muslim, Jewish. These are my people, regardless of all those contexts, because this is my community. And I feel a sense of like, if I go into the grocery store and I do somebody wrong, what's like, I have to live with that. Like, so that purpose of morality. And so I'm going to always try within the best means, humanly possible, to be a good, not just physician, but a good source of like reasonable, yes, this is a good idea. No, that's not a good idea. That vaccine is a good idea. It's not. But also recognizing we live in a free country and say, look, I can't make you do anything. I can take you up to the doorstep and give you all the information that I've got. All the medical knowledge in the world doesn't make me any better than you. Sometimes I would even say it just means I was, trying to avoid getting a real job, right? Now, that's what my dad would say. 12 years of training and all that.
Yeah, I think I think it constitutes a real job, but I think the reason, I think that the example that you gave earlier was a perfect encapsulation of this. But the reason why the patient is not going to go ahead with the super busy, one of a kind, top 5 in the country neurosurgeon until you give the go ahead is because the cornerstone of somebody, adhering or acting on medical advice is the relationship. And it just makes sense. I trust that you have my best interest in mind. This guy could be the best in the world, but I trust that you trust him. You know what I mean? But I need that relationship with you, and because I don't know him. And so when that kind of it disappears, I think that's a challenge. But I think it's very interesting if it's true, the point that you mentioned, that there's more specialists and more subspecialists and all these granular people, and there's more roles in the healthcare continuum now because of the advance of healthcare. That's actually a very interesting point.
Even within, for example, eye, you used to have one ophthalmologist, right? And they would maybe take care of your cataract. Now you have not just the ophthalmologist, then you have the retinal specialist, then you have the retinal specialist that specializes in this one type of disorder, and you got to go all the way down. And so I think I always tell patients that, and so when people find their niche or their calling, I hope that, and this is what I try to advise prospective medical students, because I think it's important to be involved in inspiring and being a part of. For example, I had an email today from a 16-year-old who's thinking about being in medicine, and their parent is my patient. I said, give them my email, send them. I said, I'll have them come spend time with me in the summer, a day or two. If they love it, great. If they hate it, because that may be the person who ends up coming back to this community, who ends up doing more good for other people. And so I think what happens in medicine is, and this is going to sound harsh, and I hope it does not offend other healthcare providers, doctors that are listening potentially to this podcast, is if you don't love what you do, if you don't find the way you're doing it is effective, if you feel like you're a cog in the wheel that is just miserable and burnt out, then you need to find a way to change it, or at least yourself. Because the last thing, you've worked so hard to get to this point, and I feel like you've sacrificed so much. And often, Dr. Google comes in, with the patient says, I Googled this and I got this answer or whatever. And you're like, I want to beat my head to the wall. But that's not bad because, I look at it and say, at least you care enough to want to know about it. Now let's, and from there, let's talk about how your symptoms may or may not be related and how you may be onto something, or maybe it's a different direction we need to go in, and so I try to be, that little bit of kindness and understanding rather than, be so frustrated. But going back to it, I think if you aren't aware that we're operating in a broken system and that nothing is perfect, and you lose the connection with the patient, you will get burnt out.
Yeah.
And so connecting with the patient as best we can, within reason, within, proper, boundaries, I think is what kind of, it's like the well at which I go back to that renews me. And I feel like, again, going back to that sense of, whatever your algorithm is or whatever it is that drives you, or faith, that I feel like this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times people get into medicine, and I've had fellow residents that have come to me from other specialists. I can think of some great ones that came to me from other residency programs that they were doing another specialty, and they just felt like they didn't connect with it. And so I think that it's hard though, because when you have $250,000 of debt or $500,000 of debt, remember one of my colleagues when I graduated, she had gone to Duke and then she had gone to UF, and Mendel, she had like 600 plus $1,000 of debt. And so, of course, she's amazing and she's a wonderful surgeon. She's not too far from you, by the way. But and she loves what she does. But it's almost like, could she have chosen primary care versus her subspecialty and been able to pay off that debt within 2 decades? I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's talk operationally for a second, because I feel like you and your practice is actually unfortunately, or I don't know, I feel, and I might be wrong, but I feel like it's kind of like a rare gem that's becoming fewer and fewer, because these large systems are coming and they're buying up all the primary care. You see a lot of movement in the market. I mean, there's been like 5 of these massive acquisitions in the last 4 months, between CVS, Amazon just bought One Medical, Walgreens, Signify being bought. There's so many of these large things that are being bought up, and I feel like there's this prevalent feeling among young, resident students and doctors, that like the new generation of doctor just wants to kind of be that, almost like just be an employee. I don't want to have to run to the ER or the hospital in the middle of the night to check on somebody. I don't want to get out of bed like you did at 7 p.m. and go visit a patient in hospice for 3 hours. I just want to be an employee. I want to, and the other feeling for, I feel like, the older docs is that their way is dying, and if they don't give in to being bought up by some large system, then there is no way to stay afloat. So I think, looking at you as somebody that's both like a young doctor, you clearly have vision, and your drive and your purpose is extraordinarily clear, but you're also like, you're doing the right side of it, but you're also running a financially successful practice, in the sense that you've got 8,000 patients, you've got a meaningful organization running. Let's talk operationally for a couple minutes. What advice would you have to a doctor that's trying to replicate or create a successful independent practice today?
Well, those are great points, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, because as someone who, for example, I had a resident yesterday rotating with me on a rotation they call practice management, which is really lots of fun. Essentially, second and third year residents who are in family medicine at UF. I'm very honored to be able to give them kind of a look at what a private practice could be like, and what it would, and usually when they leave, they do echo exactly what you said, which is, I didn't know this was possible. This is weird. Like, I thought I had to join a group of like 40 primary care doctors, and I had to be, I think you're right though, that, first off, it comes down to the individual and what level of risk is that individual willing to take. How I got here is a little circuitous, but I'll give it to you as quickly as I can, because I could talk to you for hours. I love speaking with you, and I'm honored to be on this. One, I was going to join a practice here in Lake City with another physician, a wonderful physician who's still practicing. And it turns out that, we were going to do essentially what we would call like an eat what you kill model, which is I joined their practice, and they, we share overhead, and we, and they keep seeing their patients, and I had patients of my own, and, and we kind of cover call, because I was one of those people who was inpatient, outpatient, in clinic, at lunchtime, going, and like, and doing like all those things for the first 8 years of my private practice. And I'll tell you when I changed on that one, because I think that's an important thing also. But so that was the model I was going to do, Mendel, because I wanted kind of an older doctor who had already run a practice, because, what did I know in residency? I knew about this much about coding, and that's not a fault to the program at the time. It's just, you had coders and people, and you just signed a little thing, circle a thing, hand it to somebody at checkout, and there you go. And like, I just go on to the next patient. Didn't know anything about modifiers and all those things that I needed to know, like that I should have learned in residency. Well, at the end of my residency, this other physician, who's a great person I still respect, his significant other said, maybe you should value the practice that he'd be joining, that Dr. Tepedino would be joining a little more. And he wanted me to then buy in X amount, then buy X amount for the office, and then build in a clause to buy him out after 10 to 15 years. And I looked at the numbers, and I sat down with my wife, and I kid you not, I cried, because I thought, oh, this was my dream, was to just join this person, because I thought I'd be able to be in a standalone practice medicine in a way where I felt like. And I looked at my wife, and my wife told me something, Mendel, that I have to give her tremendous credit for. She said, invest in you. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, but what if I fall on my face? And she said, fall on face, it's okay. But, she was just about to be starting residency. And we, yes, we had debt, but we didn't have any kids yet at the time. And she said, look, we can live cheap, like we're still residents, or like you're still resident. You don't need to go buy a big fancy car. She's like, you could just, start off and like, and just do it little by little, bite off what you can chew. And that's what I did. So I started working. I rented a place. I would do hospice work at night. I would buy paint at Lowe's when it was on discount. I painted every square inch with, my brother-in-law. My wife is amazing at trim, by the way. She's a dermatologist, so she doesn't even need to use tape, and she would do all the trim at the top. This was our first building that we were renting. The way luck plays out, the way fate, or God, however you want to look at it, I think it's God, but the building, my uncle said, there's this building across the way that you should look at that nobody's ever at. And so I just happened to go in the property appraiser, call up the guy. The guy's name was Dr. Romero, by the way, live oak doctor from Argentina, who did a lot of good for a lot of people. And he said, yeah, you can borrow that building. He said, what can you pay me? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't started yet. And he said, well, just pay me what you can, and then we'll go from there. So at 6 months, I was in the black. So I doubled my rent to him. And then by 2 years, I bought the building from him. By 5 years or 6 years, I sold the building and started building a new one. And then we built a thing that was even bigger. And then we just but that's not a credit to just me. That's people in life caring and thinking that the community. And so to answer your question, the school I went to learn how to run a practice is not the school I recommend all residents go to or other doctors. It's called the School of Hard Knocks. Yeah. In that school, I learned very quickly that insurance companies are not always my friend, and get it in writing and do it. And I remember, so talking about when I cried the second time starting my practice, it's when I had $324 in my bank account. And I was expecting about, I won't say their name, about $80,000 worth of money to be rolling in from one of our larger payers in this area. And they had told me and told the credentialing people, oh, he's in network, you can start seeing patients. So I'd seen patients for about 2 or 3 months. Mendel, I literally cried at 324.
They just said, never mind. What happened?
Here's what happened. I was actually in network with only one of their products.
Oh,
the other products were months away. And so they told me, they said, well, you could go ask those patients for the money.
Yeah,
said,
sure.
I can't do that. I can't
We all know
these people. These people who came to me and thought I was in network, and it was before, of course, you had automatic eligibility checks and all these things that we have now. And so you know what I did? I took it on the chin. And I remember thinking to myself, I will always get everything in writing. I will always make sure that everything is exactly that. and I will pay a lawyer to look at stuff to make sure. And so, but my point of that is not to be like, oh, I'm against insurance companies. I understand that they have a business to run, and while I'm not always, part of their master plan, I want to give good care. And so, to tell you how I got to where I am, it's really more telling you the people who believed in that this could be a thing, something crazy. And I know this is going to blow your mind because, with how things are with social media and with where we are just in general, I never advertised one time. I never advertised one time. As a matter of fact, the only advertisements that have ever been associated with my practice, one of them was when I first came to town, the hospital buys you an ad and it says, "Welcome to the community, Dr. Tepedino, now accepting patients." And then the next part was, and this is kind of funny, the local paper, they'll do like a best of the best. It's like the best of the best doctor. Of course, they have like best of the best family medicine, best of the best, whatever other specialty. And so like basically got like 50 doctors all being the best. Well, I didn't know at the time. I was like, guess what? It's because they want me to buy an ad. So then, and it's kind, but people actually do vote on it, and it is very nice that they do that. And so the only ad I did, and it was to really give thanks and recognition to the people I work with, to Hillary Bailey, Spring Kramer, Jessica Murray, these providers that work with me every day. That like I can't do what I do without them caring. And the recipe for them being so good is they have supportive loved ones or family members or people that believed in them to get them where they are, and they care about the community. And like the underlying part is not only do you have to work with people that are smart, you have to have people that care.
Yeah.
And so when a patient comes in, the experience they have in my office, I think on a whole is mostly a positive one, because not only do we do, evidence-based medicine, not only do we do, what needs to be done as far as managing chronic conditions, and of course, with the help of your company, do an even better job. We also care. Like we get to know them. We want part of so yes, it is a job. Yes, checking a bunch of boxes, doing refills, making sure things go out properly. And when people ask for this and, your diabetic shoe forms. And so in family medicine or primary care or internal medicine, there is a lot of paperwork. Part of what keeps us up is synthesizing and processing information that comes from other specialists to make sure the left hand knows what the right hand's doing. But we do it because it's a labor of love. We do it because we connect with the patient. And so if there is that lack of connection from the beginning, and you are withdrawn from the position, and we don't give it the proper reverence of what that relationship means, there is no way to have primary care, in my mind, be a sustainable product unless you go with a large model where I'm a cog of the wheel. I show up, I click it, click out, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I tell residents that. I go, it really depends on what you want out of it, on what kind of relationship you want out of it. But at the same time, I also don't want to hear those residents complain when they do sign up for a job and they're like promised this huge bonus to sign on, and then they feel like they're not getting treated like a person. It's like, well, what did you think?
Right.
They were going to be your best friend.
Right.
They were about your RVUs.
Right.
And I'm not saying that RVUs aren't important, because you've got to keep a practice afloat. But at the end of the day, I saw, I'm not going to say any names, but I saw a young lady who had some plan that we don't take, which was something where it had been assigned, it was a Medicaid, HMO, whatever. I saw her for free 3 times. Why? Because she was the daughter of one of my patients, and there were some issues going on, and I wanted to rectify it. And guess what? Nobody's going to yell at me that I didn't meet my RVUs on those visits that I saw for her, because it was the right thing to do. It just felt like the right thing. I wanted to do it, and that was it.
Right. It really is fantastic, and I know we're coming up on time, and I think we're going to have to do a part 2 because of all. No, I'm serious, because we have some fabulous guests, but a lot of the people that we have on and blessed to have on are kind of at the bird's eye view of healthcare, but you're in this just really dynamic position where you're boots on the ground, but you're running an organization, and it's really fantastic. And honestly, we could go on for another probably 2 hours. So consider this a pause for the audience. And I do hope to come back for part 2. Dr. Tepedino, thank you so much for coming on today. It's fantastic to talk to you.
Mendel, thank you. I'm honored to spend time with you. I know what you do is incredible work. The people you work with as well are amazing. Thank you for this opportunity. I consider that if that's an invitation, I'm accepting.
Yes. Done.
All right.